Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. I thought it might make sense to do another episode of Cliff Dwellers. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Let me just post this a couple different places and then we will jump in. How's everyone doing today? All right, so let's watch. I think this is a pretty important level. This is the same level we came down to on, January 22nd, January 21st, somewhere in that ballpark. So we're right at that same level. Okay, we're right at that same level. And back then we had an hourly candle that took us down, and then the next one, the next two, really the next three candles completely wiped away the one that took us down. So let's just watch. We're just going to watch to see what happens. Obviously, predicting these short-term moves are incredibly difficult to do. So, again, this all goes back to managing risk, right? not chasing bubbles. If you're not chasing the bubble, then you don't really care because your cost basis is so much lower than 30K. If you chase the bubble at 42K, it's a lot harder to stomach. But again, let's watch. I mean, maybe we bounce from here. Again, we put out a video earlier today talking about like the bullish scenario and the bearish scenario, and so far we've more or less just been range bound between this and putting in lower highs along the way. We will see what happens. We'll certainly see what happens. But when you zoom out, it can definitely paint a bigger, it'll show you the bigger picture, right? And I think that's what's important. If you zoom, and for instance, depending on how far you zoom out, can show you entirely different aspects, right? So like if you zoom out to a day, I don't think there's a decent chance it bounces, but I don't think that many people would be surprised if it did come back down some after this amazing move. But then, you zoom out to like a week or something, we need to switch this to log. This could just be the beginning of a much longer market cycle. So again, if you bought in at 42K, which hopefully not too many people did, but obviously people did, if you did, then I think that Bitcoin will bail you out this market cycle. Okay, I don't think you'll have to wait like 3 years or anything. I think that Bitcoin will bail you out this market cycle. So I don't think that there's really any huge reason to be discouraged. Just have to learn from your mistakes and move on. It would be similar maybe to the people that bought in at 14K. And maybe it wasn't the best short-term decision, but it didn't take that long for them to be doing well again. So we'll see. We'll see. I mean, again, this is an area where Bitcoin could hold the line. This is where I did it a few days ago, but it might not. Let's overlay the regression band so we can see just where that is. So here's our regression band. So far we have not been able to make it to the top, right? And there is some uncertainty. There is some uncertainty about the top. There's only fit to 3 data points. It doesn't even show the last one because we're not on the BLX. But I want to keep it on this one so that we can see the price live. But historically, this regression line has helped us identify our peaks, and then these were more or less. That one was obviously did not take us to the top, and it's possible this one doesn't as well. Yeah, someone says, what do I make of lengthening cycles? I think they could still theoretically be a thing. As we said before, it's simply too early to know yet. Getting to 42K in January does not automatically mean we're going to go to 300K in December. So I think people should be a little bit pragmatic. We actually put out a video a few hours ago talking. So I thought it was pretty cool. We've shown both of these bar patterns in the past, but depending on whether you take, say, like an intra-market cycle pattern or an inter-market cycle pattern, you can get a lot, very different results if you try to match these up. So if you first start with, say, the market cycle bottom and look at the market cycle ROI, and you just kind of compare it to the prior cycle, this is a very bullish perspective, right? This would be a very bullish perspective because it shows that maybe this is just one of those stops along the way. Maybe we go back down to the 20-week SMA, which is still a ways to go, or maybe we don't. This would be a bullish perspective to have. Now, I don't think that Bitcoin has a snowball's chance in hell at keeping pace with this cycle, but I'm not going to say it can't happen. But I don't think it's going to happen. And that would go even if the cycle is not lengthened, right? Even if the cycle is not lengthening, I don't think that it will ultimately go all the way back up to around 300K. Because that's ultimately what we need to get to so that we would not experience diminishing returns. So that's one pattern that we can look at and say, well, if you look at the last market cycle as measured from the bottom, like we're actually ahead of schedule. Okay, and even at the current price, in terms of its ROI for market cycle bottom, by the last cycle, we wouldn't have gotten to the current price until another 2 months. So, yes, it could theoretically come back down and still be on course. But then there's the bearish perspective, right? The bearish perspective looks more at say, this cycle and looks at this. And says, well, what if it's what if we do something like this again, which we just did this cycle. So let me delete that. So this is the pattern from here, and then if we just kind of move it over, something like that, you can see how well that one lines up too. So the cool thing about both of these perspectives, and of course Bitcoin will not do either one of them. But the cool thing about either perspective is that both of them are fairly bullish long term, right? Or, on more than a daily time frame, both of them are fairly bullish. If we're able to continue moving up this curve, then so be it, right? Great. We're going to go to much higher highs sooner. If we don't, it doesn't necessarily mean that Bitcoin's peak for the cycle is 42K. It just maybe it's a longer cycle, right? So I think we need to keep an open mind and say, there's possibilities for other types of things that we could have rather than it has to do what it did last cycle. Again, I said last year that if we're above 20K by January, I'll keep an open mind about a shorter cycle. So we're going to keep an open mind about it. We're not going to completely discount it. But with that said, I think we should remain somewhat flexible on the idea that, where is it currently? So this was the purpose of the video earlier today, to basically say, okay, well, let's look at a different perspective rather than just looking at this cycle ROI. Either way, I mean, whether the cycle ultimately is a short-term correction and we continue on from here, or we correct more and continue on later, I do think that 42K is more or less a blip along the path. It's interesting, if you put up the regression band, it shows you just how bullish it would be to get to this level by, say, October or something. Okay, look at how bullish it would have to be. I mean, it would essentially, and we're not going to say it can't happen because it could. It's only fit to 3 data points. But if you extend this out, something like this, where it's, it does something like that, this would certainly be a very, very bullish perspective. And again, we're not saying it can't happen. Just keep in mind how bullish Bitcoin would need to be over the next 10 months or so. One of the, one fundamental, and we don't talk about the F word that much on this channel, but one fundamental reason that I think you could somewhat argue for a cycle longer, and that doesn't necessarily mean 2020 has to be a bad year. I mean, or 2021. I mean, maybe we end 2021 at 50K, and then we end 2022 at 100K, or like one fundamental reason could be if this really is the cycle, and it seems like there's a, I mean, it seems like it already is. If this cycle is really the cycle of institutional money, it's not like institutional money can just wake up one day and say, hey, let's go put $100 million on Bitcoin. It is a long process, right? It's a rather long process for them to actually go about doing it if they've never ventured into the cryptocurrency world before. And that's why I think it's more likely to be drawn out longer than say necessarily ending in 11 months. Just from a fundamental reason, not even talking about what the price has to be at the end of the year or anything like that, but just from a fundamental idea of, well, if this market cycle really is the institutional cycle, are we going to have 10,000 institutions FOMOing into Bitcoin all the way up to several $100,000, or is it the idea of, okay, well, institutional money's coming in, people front run it because they think that institutional money can never be short-term dumb money, which is not true, and then we keep rinsing and repeating the same narrative. And again, it's a true narrative, right, that institutional money's coming into the space, but I think we just need to be a little bit, let's just be flexible and see where things take us. If we overlay the regression rainbow, we came right up to that 2.5 log line mark from peak to peak. At least so far, obviously doesn't have this isn't the BLX, but we know that from this peak over here that you can't see to this one, it was 2.5 lines. This one was 2.5. So far, this one has been 2.5 as well, which, this one came up to this line. This one came up slightly more. And remember, these are monotonically increasing, so, I mean, by the time, if it comes back up to it later, then it could be well over 100K by that point. So, time, I would say, one of the great things about Bitcoin is that time is on our side. I think time is on our side, and the longer we just continue chugging along, Bitcoin will ultimately trend up in price, but it's just a matter of how exactly do we get there. Is it going to be as systematic as the last cycle, where we just more or less went straight up, where we had a pretty well-defined market structure and we just went straight up? If we put this one back on, pretty well-defined accumulation phase for Bitcoin last cycle, and then ultimately we just went up, right? We ultimately just went up and we corrected back down to our Bitcoin bull market support band every step of the way. So far, this cycle has been completely different. If you look at where the accumulation phase was, if you assume it was in the same window here on, say, this line, let me delete some of this stuff so we can actually see what the hell's going on. So if you assume that this was our accumulation window, it was not even close to being as structured as well as it was last cycle. Because the last cycle, we more or less just stayed within this band. This cycle, we came up to this band a couple times now, but we also went down to this one. So this one has so far been marked with a peak here, and then a valley down here. And then so far, again, it could continue, right? But so far, a peak here. So this cycle has been very different from the last cycle. And I think we need to keep that in mind as we continue to navigate this cycle, that it's likely not going to do exactly what the last cycle did. But let's see. I mean, I think obviously right now is a pretty important time as we decide whether we are holding this in the short term or not. So let's take a look here. So we're still right around that bottom. This was the bottom that we had 5 days ago, more or less. So that's where we are right now. Obviously, a lot of people, especially those who bought in the higher 30s, 40K range, are probably biting their teeth, wanting it to go back up. But again, if you don't chase the bubbles, and you just kind of sit back for a while and let Bitcoin do its thing, especially when it's doing something, something as crazy as that, right? And you just kind of let it do its thing for a while. It's not really that big of a deal if it, no matter really what happens. So hopefully this is interesting. If you look at the Bitcoin dominance, it has started moving sideways a bit here, which is around the same level that was moving sideways at over here. One thing too is if you look at, say, a monthly candle on the dominance, I mean, we don't talk about traditional TA that often, but looks like it could end up being one of those engulfing candles that typically is a momentum shift, right? I mean, similar to this one, right? Just something, and this one was the one from 2018, so we'll see what happens there, and we'll see. I mean, we'll see if we can get back above 30K. We're almost back above it. So far, this would be our second test of this area. I mean, if we went back further, we didn't get quite this low. So the last time we were here before this 22nd was on January 4th. So we've actually been at this level more or less. This is our third time. One was on the way up, though. This one was on the way up. And then we had a here, and then so far here. So we'll see if we get a bounce. Last time, after coming down to this level, it actually bounced back up to about 34K. Relatively quickly, in fact. Over the span of a day, it bounced back to 34K. So I do think this is an important level because I would imagine that sometime over the next couple hours or few hours, we're going to get a little bit more direction as to whether this is bouncing and continuing up or if we're heading to new lows. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Give the video a thumbs up. We also have a Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate everyone being here. And also, I do appreciate getting to 100,000 subscribers. So that's pretty cool. Let's look at the, I mean, Ether Bitcoin is still holding up relatively well. It's at 0.0414. So from the perspective of Ethereum, it is still doing quite well against its Bitcoin valuation. So if you look at Ether Bitcoin, it hasn't, I mean, it's come down a little bit this week, but it's still holding up relatively well so far. So we'll see if this can continue or not. Obviously, everything's watching Bitcoin right now to see what Bitcoin does. Also, something to consider too that could be maybe behind the dump today. Not necessarily because there was a few days ago, both were dumping, but the dollar is up 0.7% today, and we were talking about how the dollar going up tends to make Bitcoin go down. So, just I would always say keep an eye on the dollar, DXY. Just put it on your watch list so you know where it is. This is exactly where it chopped sideways back in 2018. In fact, early 2018, this is where the dollar put up a stand. We're not saying it's going to put up a stand. We're not saying it's going to win this battle, but this is where there was a lot of uncertainty last time. Here's Ethereum. Yeah, I have this little rainbow I made. I thought it was interesting that every time it gets to this yellow band, it seems to hesitate for a few weeks. You know, it did it here. It did it here. Again, these are imaginary lines. I don't think we should put too much credence into them, but it's doing it again here. Yeah, I noticed the stock market. Yeah, the stock market came down too a little bit. You can see it here. You can see it up here. We can switch this over to say like a 1 minute time frame so we can actually see what's going on. Yeah, the whole GameStop stuff is it's interesting to say the least. I mean, we won't get into that too much now, but if you're not familiar with what's going on with GameStop, I would encourage you to go check it out. Where did it bottom? It bottomed at like 29,153 so far. So that's where it's bottomed so far. So we'll see if we're gonna bounce here at the same level we bounced at about 5 days ago. So you can see the last bounce came around the same level. Let's see what happens. These are 5-minute candles. Yeah, those who say that stocks can't do anything, you know, 2020 stocks, the stock market in 2020 was very different than it normally is. You had things like Tesla going up, you know, thousands of percent. I mean, just in the last 3 days, GME is up several hundred percent. So, actually, maybe even more. So, stocks are definitely very volatile right now. It's funny because I think, you know, when you think about Bitcoin, I think most people thought that eventually, and I mean, I think this is still true, but most people thought that eventually Bitcoin volatility would eventually become like the stock market, and I think it will. But in the short term, what's actually happened is that stock market volatility has actually become more like Bitcoin. So it's kind of an interesting observation that rather than in 2020 and 2021, at least so far, rather than Bitcoin volatility significantly calming down. I mean, even with the price movements of Bitcoin today, it's still less volatile than it was 10 years ago, if you can believe it. It's true. But it is funny that the stock market has actually become more like Bitcoin in the short term rather than the other way around. Yeah, and Tesla is a textbook. I mean, Tesla's a great example of the stock market doing that. 1,400% since January 13th on GameStop. Yeah. Let's go look at it really quick. Let's go GME. Here's GameStop. For those who think that stocks can't do anything, this is the GameStop GME. Look at this. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Look, starting here. I mean, over the last like few, you know, not even that long a period of time. Like literally in January, it's up like 1,500%. So we can zoom in a little bit more so we can see what happened. Yeah, I mean, look at this. Like in July, it was at $4, and now it's at $306. I mean, this is a 7,700% move. And again, just over the last few days, 6 days or so, 6 days, it's up 600%. This, I mean, certainly buying into this thing would be incredibly risky right now. Um, Basically, I think part of it, and I don't know the full story, but some people on the Wall Street, bets Reddit were looking at it and realizing that a lot of these major firms were shorting it, and they realized that a short squeeze could happen relatively easily, and so the rest is history. Yeah, it's not. I mean, I don't think it's going up on any fundamental reason. It's going up because some of the people on that Reddit wanted to, they wanted to take the institutions for a ride, which is pretty impressive if you think about the buying power there. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the people shorting GameStop are now not looking so good. So far, we're still bouncing up. We'll see if this move continues. I mean, obviously, there's the potential narrative, right, of a double bottom. So we'll want to keep that in mind. One thing though, if it does bounce from here, and we come back up, which by the way, if we did come back up and then went sideways for a little bit, it probably would be really good for like Ethereum. So keep that in mind. Like if Bitcoin were to bounce again here and then go sideways, again, this would be great for coins like Ethereum more than likely. And I mean, it depends on how long it goes sideways, right? If it can go sideways for several days, then that can start catalyzing Ethereum again. So keep that in mind. If you do see a bounce, that would likely be good, not only for Ethereum, but also for a lot of altcoins. I mean, you can see a lot of the altcoin market is down pretty substantially. I mean, ADA and DOT are both. ADA is down about 7%, DOT about 8%, Link 7%. So Bitcoin is only down about 6.5% or so. So if it bounces, this will probably be good for altcoins. Now, one thing to also consider is that imagine a scenario where it bounces back up but doesn't put in a new high. Okay, so let's zoom in here. So one scenario, right, is where it bounces. So let me remove this, and let's actually move this up to the daily closes up here. So one potential scenario, right, is that it bounces, but it still continues this trend. In the same way, as they would say, in the same way that the more times you test something going up, right? Remember when we kept testing 20K? We kept testing it, and then eventually we broke through. I think you could also say the same thing to the downside. I mean, if we bounce here and we come back up and get rejected again and come back down, every time we test it, I think the likelihood goes up that we ultimately break it. But the good news is even if Bitcoin does ultimately break below it, which we're not saying it would, but even if it did, then in the short term, if we were to get a bounce back up, again, this could be really good for another altcoin surge. So just keep that in mind. I mean, obviously buying altcoins at the very moment would be really risky because you're basically betting on Bitcoin to hold this level, which we're not sure yet. I mean, I think we need to see what happens. We have bottomed around this level a few times. Obviously, we haven't been going too much below 30K. We haven't really been below 30K since January 2nd in a sustainable way, right? I mean, like we've had wicks below 30K, but we haven't actually been closing daily candles or anything below 30K. So far, we've just had wicks below it. Someone says he's 400% up on DOT. I think I'll survive. That's the whole point, right? Is to buy when the risk is low before all this mania happens, and then it makes it a lot easier to navigate this stuff, because hopefully you can come at it from a more rational perspective rather than an emotional perspective. Certainly buying at 42K would probably make people a little bit more emotional watching it at this level, because, well, if it does break, that would, and if it starts heading down pretty quickly, that might turn some stomachs, but we'll see. We'll see if it holds. We'll keep the stream going on a little bit longer, because I would like to see if it holds. Let's look at the hourly time frame again. So again, this was down where we bottomed. So basically the same area. Right now we're actually back at the top of the candle that took us down. So we're back up. Make sure you guys subscribe. Give the video a thumbs up. I don't even know how many subscribers we're at now, but after I got to 100,000, it was pretty, that was the milestone I was looking at forever. Now we're at 102,000, so that's pretty cool. Make sure you guys subscribe if you guys like the content, and give the video a thumbs up. We also have a Telegram channel, again, that you guys can join. We have almost 14,000 members, so we'll post that in the chat. Let's take a look at Ethereum. So yeah, again, one of the things we said for Ethereum, and we'll just go through this systematically again. I told people they're not going to want to hear it a few days ago, even though it is a potentially bullish scenario in the short term. But if you go and look at daily candles for Ethereum, and we talk about what Bitcoin did, right? So let's go look again at what Bitcoin did when Bitcoin broke its prior all-time high. Let's segue over to here for a few minutes. So if you're holding Ethereum, you might find this interesting. Again, Ethereum, the first caveat is that Ethereum will ultimately carve its own path, okay? And it's ultimately dependent on Bitcoin. The only way, or I feel like the primary way that what I'm about to say could actually unfold would be if Bitcoin holds 30K at the bottom, or 29K, and ultimately, continues to slowly move back up. But Bitcoin came up to its prior all-time high, which was around 19.5, okay? And it got rejected back down. And then 5 days later, from the wick to the next wick up here, it was up about almost 2%. And it took 5 days once it first tested the prior all-time high to then when it actually broke it. So then let's look at Ethereum. So Ethereum did something very similar. It came up to its prior all-time high, or close to it, right here, around 1440. And then 6 days later, from wick to wick, it was up about 2%. So a very similar move when Bitcoin reached its prior all-time high, and then eventually broke it. And then when Ethereum now reached its prior all-time high, and then eventually broke it. But then what happened next, right? What happened next? Well, after Bitcoin broke it, it actually dropped back down to the bottom of the wick 11%, almost 12%. So a 12% drop after putting in a definitive new all-time high. We saw a 12% drop. What has Ethereum done so far from the top? 18% down. And we said, I said this back then, that, Bitcoin volatility is less than Ethereum's. So if Ethereum continues following Bitcoin, we would actually expect more volatility not only to the upside, but also to the downside. And actually, we've seen that. So very similar moves, right? Bitcoin to the all-time high, and then it came back down. And let's measure this, because it dropped. Let's see. Let me move this. Need to move that out of the way. So it dropped 17% before ultimately going back up and putting in a new all-time high. And Ethereum did something similar, but it was more exaggerated. From the peak it dropped around 28%. So so far in terms of conquering the prior all-time high and hopefully moving past it, Ethereum has done a slightly exaggerated version of Bitcoin, right? When it dumped harder, and then when it pumped back up, it pumped higher, and then when it dumped again, it dumped harder. And what happened? So Bitcoin bled over 11 days. So that's what Bitcoin ended up doing, and it took it. Ultimately, it took it about 16 days before it blasted back off, and then went up 2x from there. So 17 days, or let's say 16 days. Let's see if what would that look like for Ethereum. So 16 days from the peak. If we go out 16 days, if it follows what Bitcoin did, which it probably won't, but if it did, that would be February 10th. So that would look like February 10th. Would be the breakout point if it followed exactly what Bitcoin did, which it probably won't. But just to give you guys some perspective, Bitcoin conquered the prior all-time high in a very similar manner so far as Ethereum is doing right now. Let's go take a look back at Bitcoin and see if it's holding. It looks like it is for right now. Let's look at the hourly time frame. So far, it is bouncing. We'll see if it holds. If we put the regression rainbow for Ethereum on, we have seen some hesitation at this point, as we showed earlier, right? At the yellow line, we saw some hesitation here. We saw a little bit of hesitation here. Maybe we're hesitating a little bit longer before hopefully moving into the orange band. By the way, if it were to go into the orange band in the short term and go up to the top, the top of the orange band actually takes us up to around 2,700. So if it is able to move into that band and continue on up, it might, the top of the band today is at around 2,700. But of course, these are changing every single day. Someone says his alt season started. Yeah, I mean, obviously we're not at like the lows. We're not at the lows of 2018 for the Bitcoin dominance. But when the dominance of Bitcoin is dropping 10%, while the price of Bitcoin is also dropping, this is alt season, right? I mean, it might not be the alt season you've dreamed of or you want in the short term. It doesn't mean you won't eventually get an alt season like that. But when the dominance of Bitcoin is dropping 10% while the price is dropping, to me, that is alt season. And a lot of altcoins have actually done really well over the last few weeks. And if yours hasn't, if you think like, oh, it can't be alt season because my altcoin hasn't done anything, maybe you have a bad altcoin. Some of them are duds. Blaine says, how's the Bitcoin bull market support? Well, it's not a regression band, the bull market regression band. I think what you mean. I think what you mean is the 20-week SMA and the 21-week EMA. Yeah, we can pull them up. This one. So right now it ranges from 20,410 up to 22,657. Obviously, no guarantee we make it there, but that is where it is at the present time. And we need to keep in mind that it could end up doing something like this, right? I mean, if we continue to bleed down week over week, right? I mean, again, momentum is hard to break, so we'll see if we break it. But I mean, so far this is the third week in a row. Obviously, we still have some time in the week left. In fact, we're about halfway through, but by the time we get to the support band, if this bleed ultimately does continue and 30K does not eventually hold, then the support band could be even higher. And this would be not to say that we have to hold it as support. This would just be what we would want to hold as support to maintain the integrity of the bull market. Yeah, let's look at the monthly candle. It's a pretty interesting monthly candle for sure. These are monthly candles. It's interesting too because the dominance is actually dropping. So you guys should take notes here because this is one of those key times where alts are, I mean, Ethereum is remaining really strong. Look at this. We looked at it a little bit ago and it was 0.0414. Now it's at 0.0422. Right now, Ethereum is remaining strong. And so my best guess as to what's going on are there's a lot of Ethereum bulls really hoping that Bitcoin holds this level. Because if it does, if Bitcoin does hold this level, then there's a decent chance that Ethereum bounces back even more than Bitcoin. So, there's definitely people trying to front run this Ethereum move on the idea that Ethereum will ultimately blast past this yellow band and maybe into the orange band and go up to new highs. But I mean, it is a risk, right? Make no mistake about it. I would not be buying Ethereum here. It's not financial advice, and it doesn't mean I don't want Ethereum to go higher. I own a lot of Ethereum. But buying it at $1,200 when it was less than $100 10 months ago just seems like you're not managing your risk appropriately. But again, I mean, if it ends up going to $5,000 in a couple years and looking at it at $1,200 isn't necessarily a bad deal. But my philosophy, as I have said extensively, is to never chase bubbles. And again, it doesn't mean that I don't want the price to go up because I still own a lot of Ethereum. I still own a lot of Ethereum. It just means that by not chasing them, at least you're keeping your cost basis down, and it keeps you from panicking, right? It keeps you from panicking. So, but again, if you have a long-term outlook, or if you're in a situation where you're new to the market, right? I come from it from a bias perspective. This is one of the things I have to try to consider more on the channel, and we've been saying it for Bitcoin since it broke out, from 10K. I stopped buying Bitcoin back at around 12.5K. I still own a lot of Bitcoin, but I stopped buying it at 12.5K, and I focused on Ethereum. Once Bitcoin started moving, and again, this was all on the premium list into the cryptoverse.com, so I promise you, I'm not making this stuff up. So, and for future reference, if you're new, there will be a time in the future where Bitcoin tests the bull market support band, which is the 20-week SMA and the 21-week EMA. Historically, when Bitcoin is testing this level, it's typically good to focus on Bitcoin accumulation. And the reason is because if Bitcoin goes up or down or continues to hug the bull market support band, most likely most altcoins will bleed. Okay? There are situations where some altcoins can perform well. Maybe we'll talk about one of those in a few minutes. But a lot of times, if Bitcoin is hugging the 20-week moving average, then buying Bitcoin, focusing on Bitcoin accumulation, tends to work out the best because there's so many different scenarios where no matter what it does in the short term, buying Bitcoin would have been the best thing because the alt-Bitcoin ratio will likely bleed. So I was focusing on buying Bitcoin in this region. I stopped buying it here, and I started focusing more on Ethereum, Link, ADA, and DOT. Okay? And that's how I manage the risk, right? I get Bitcoin when it makes sense to get Bitcoin, but at the same time, I want to improve my potential upside with the altcoin market. I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist by any means. I'm not a maximalist of anything, right? I mean, I just see this stuff as a vehicle to increase my wealth, to be completely honest, right? I don't really care about the, I mean, yeah, like it would be cool if people started using blockchain. But at the end of the day, I mean, I know some people care about that. There is a part of me that, thinks that blockchain will revolutionize a lot of industries. But at the end of the day, like if I don't make money on it, on this potential revolution of blockchain, then I feel like I did something wrong. I'm just being honest, right? I'm not going to pretend like I'm some altruistic person that wants everyone in the world to start using blockchain. I want to make money on this asset class, and I think most people do as well. Everyone says they're in it for the tech, but then when the bear market hits, a lot of people are really frustrated. And I think that's proof that a lot of people are actually in it for the money and not for the tech. But anyways, it looks like for now, so we're back at 30.5, 30.6. Yeah, I know people would be disappointed in that statement. But it's the truth, right? I mean, that's just simply the truth. Like, I'm not going to pretend that that is my main focus, right? I mean, again, it would be cool if Bitcoin and blockchain did revolutionize industries, and I think there's a decent chance it will. But at the end of the day, if you were in crypto in, say, like 2019, 2020, even 2021, and we're looking at like a $100,000 Bitcoin later on, and you didn't profit from that, even though you saw the potential of Bitcoin, then I feel like you would be somewhat sad about that. But again, I don't speak for everyone, and I'm sure other people have differing opinions. So yeah, the bull market support band is still a ways down. So we're nowhere close to it right now. In fact, to get to it at the present valuations of these moving averages, Bitcoin would need to dump another 26% to get to the 21-week EMA, or another 30-something% to get to the 20-week SMA. So we're still nowhere close. But again, so far we are trending down, right? I mean, so far that is what's happened. We'll see if we can break out of this downtrend. We've had these types of downtrends last cycle too, where we trended down for a few weeks, right? But most of these downtrends last cycle stopped at the bull market support band, right? I mean, every single one of them, for the most part. There was one. I mean, here was one that didn't stop there, but that was also at the very end. But every one of the prior corrections stopped, for the most part, at the bull market support band last cycle. So far, this cycle has been very different. And one possibility that we have to consider is, what if we don't break 30K, and what if the bull market support band just comes to us? I mean, what, like over here, like in 2019, where it ultimately just trended sideways for a while. If we did something like that, let's actually do a bar pattern on that, and let's go over the daily time frame so we get a little bit more resolution. So back in 2019, we trended sideways until we went back down to it. So let's actually grab that bar pattern and then overlay it to see what that would look like. So something like that. So if we repeated that, and I mean, you can see how well it lines up. Then maybe it'll look something like this. Maybe Bitcoin bounces back down. I mean, we're back to 28K, back up to 34, back down to like just under 29, and back up to 38. That would be something. And then we continue doing that, and then we decide, right? Because at this point, when it broke right there, that was where the moving average was. So you can imagine a universe where it does something like that, and that's what the 20-week does. Imagine that's what the 20-week does, and they would cross right before that if this happens. So it would look something like this, where this maybe comes up and crosses. And so this would be if this happens, this would be kind of the day of reckoning, so to speak. If we end up just trending sideways to eventually test it. And then that'll be like, okay, well, we did the same thing that we did in 2019. Are we going to hold it and bounce higher, right? Are we going to hold it? And then, by the way, if this pattern did play out, it would correspond to happening in April. So it would still be a while. And then we would want to see if we hold the line. Remember, we earlier in the show, if we have a lot of new people, by the way, make sure you guys subscribe and give the video a thumbs up if you guys like the content. Let's go for a thousand likes, and also subscribe. So let's overlay those bar patterns again that we were looking at earlier, just for the sake of everyone seeing it in case you didn't see it. So the first scenario is the bullish case, right? The bullish case where we assume that the cycle will continue on like the prior cycle, but that in fact we recognize that currently we're ahead of schedule. So something like this, right? And so at the current valuation, we're ahead of schedule compared to the last cycle if you measure it from market cycle bottom. So this would be the first scenario, and this would be the short-term bullish scenario, which takes us much higher in the short term. Again, for it to keep up with the prior cycle, it would correspond to more or less going to a let's get the bottom or so. More or less correspond to around a $300,000 Bitcoin in 11 months, which I really have a hard time believing. But again, we're not going to say it can't definitively happen. And then the other bar pattern is an intra-market cycle bar pattern, where we just look at the pattern from here to, say, here. Let's just look at that. Let's color code it a different color. And then if we move it from here over to this pattern, right, then maybe that might be a bearish perspective, a short-term bearish perspective. And then even though it's a bearish perspective in the short term, it's still a relatively bullish perspective to have. And maybe it would look something like that ultimately. I don't know. I mean, obviously we'll need to wait and see. What do you guys think? Do you think that, let me know in the chat, do you think are you more in agreement with the short-term bull perspective, where this is just a temporary stop and we're ultimately going to trend up like that? Or do you think we'll trend down for a while, regroup, and then trend back up? Or let's go for a third option. Do you think it'll obviously do something completely different? And obviously the third option is most likely to be the one that's correct, because that's the option where it doesn't do exactly what prior cycles did, or even earlier in this cycle. But obviously another perspective could just be that it does its own thing and maybe comes in here and does something like this, right? So we have to consider that it might do something different. Yeah, by the way, for this type of trend, we're not necessarily saying that's going to capitulate like this, because I honestly have a hard time seeing an $11,000 Bitcoin again. You never really know. But this is including the pandemic dump, which, I don't know that we're going to see something like that again if we stay, at least for this while we're in the cycle. We might, but I mean, even if you exclude this part, like imagine you just you just say this never happens, right? Say that this just doesn't happen. I mean, there's still the perspective of it could trend down and then ultimately regroup and trend back up. Yeah, and someone says it depends on the dollar. I agree. I mean, a lot of it does depend on the dollar. Depends on what the dollar ends up doing in the short term. And remember, the dollar chopped sideways for a while last time. It took it about 4 months for it to definitively decide what the dollar was going to do. It did not really break out of this pattern until late April. So it could be just chopping sideways for a while before it gives us a better indication as to what it's going to do. This is insane. I mean, just looking at GameStop and GMA, it's at 360. This is ridiculous. All right, so Bitcoin, it looks like so far it is bounced. We'll see if it holds it. Let's go to a hourly time frame again and look at the candles. So far it has bounced. That doesn't mean, by the way, it's going to continue to bounce, but hopefully, I mean, obviously, the best case scenario for Ethereum and a lot of altcoins that a lot of people hold would be that Bitcoin does bounce and then turn sideways for a while longer. That would be a good perspective for Ethereum. I mean, Ethereum's already back over $1,300. So the best thing for Ethereum would be Bitcoin bounces, Ethereum rides that bounce, and then Bitcoin goes sideways, and then Ethereum breaks its prior all-time high again and trends higher. That would be, that would be the best thing probably for Ethereum in the short term. Yeah, Ethereum is looking really strong. I mean, the Ether Bitcoin valuation is still doing very well and is near its local top already. I mean, the local top is around 0.044, almost 0.045, and we're already at 0.0422. So week over week, Ethereum has been trending up against Bitcoin. Yeah, I know. We've looked at Uni before on here, and I'll pull it up again. I do hold Uni, as I said, when it was like $2 and $3. We don't talk about it a whole lot because there's not a whole lot of stuff to talk about. But yeah, I mean, it's now closing in on $15. By the way, this is one I on the premium list I did say that I owned. So this one's doing quite well. I think it's about to usher itself into the top 10, in fact. Let's take a look. So here's the top 10. Uniswap's in 13th place, but we don't count stable coins. We don't count USD coin. We don't count Tether. So really, it's in the top 11. It's already in the top 11. If it flips Stellar, it's in the top 10 by my book. Maybe not by your book, but by my book, Uni flipping Stellar would put it in the top 10. So yeah, I mean, you have to count XRP. I mean, it's still up there, right? You can't say it doesn't count. It's still in 4th place, not including stablecoins. Yeah, I know. I've seen a lot of people. I've seen a lot of people want me to talk about this one. Um, how do you pronounce this one? Actually, is it Ave? I honestly don't know. I've never. I'm not going to pretend to know something about a coin that I haven't really looked into, and I don't really know that much about this coin. But I have noticed it doing well recently. Avi, Ave, Ave. Is that right? Ave. All right, Ave. Yeah, I mean, I've been watching it. It has been moving up the ranks. I mean, it definitely is showing strength recently. We'll keep an eye on. It's hard. I mean, it's obviously hard to know which ones will rise up through the ranks, but Uniswap is one that I have been pretty bullish on since it launched. Mainly because the exchange has been garnishing a lot of attention, and if you wanted to say some exposure to DeFi, I think this one is a decent one to get exposure there as well. Obviously, buying it 5x up is risky, but I certainly would not be surprised to see it go into the top 10. And you guys know I don't say that lightly. Um, so we'll keep an eye on this one. I mean, I actually I would like to see this one move into the top. I mean, I feel like, you know, some of these coins like Litecoin and Bitcoin Cash will ultimately fall out, um, and will be replaced by other projects. Maybe Uniswap is one of them. I've also seen a lot of people talk about synthetics. I mean, you know, I don't. The purpose, right, is to just focus on a few coins, right? And for the last year and a half, I mainly focused on Bitcoin, Ethereum, Link, and ADA. And then starting 6 months ago or so, I started focusing on Polkadot. And those have risen. They've risen through the ranks, right? You can see now, obviously, Bitcoin and Ethereum are already at the top, but now we have Dot, ADA, and Link as well. And so my top five now make up the top six. So now that that's happened, I'm always interested in trying to figure out, you know, what coins will join these in the top 10. Because back then these coins were not in the top 10. I mean, ADA and Link were not in the top 10 at various points. Obviously, Polkadot launched in September, so Uniswap maybe one going to the top 10. Maybe this one. I don't know. I haven't really looked into this one that much, but to be honest, but um, it is grabbing my attention because it is having a strong run. Someone says it blows my mind that you're not clicking. He says clinking two buttons to actually use Uniswap and see how it works. I've used Uniswap a lot before. Maybe he's talking to someone else. Yeah, I mean, yeah. There's always the fear of the SEC and whatnot. I mean, that's just the price you pay. That's the cost of admission for the altcoin market right now. There's always risks involved, and let's not discount the risks involved. So Kevin, we actually looked at GameStop earlier, so you should just scroll back and you'll see it. Yeah, some of the coins are not bleeding as much. I mean, a lot of altcoins have actually held up relatively well. Especially if you compare where they pumped from. I mean, Dot was at what, like $3 a few weeks ago, and now it's still just shy of $16. I mean, Link is over $20, which not that long ago was this, like, nebulous milestone that it couldn't get past, and now it's at 2160. Um, the market has definitely changed a lot over the last few weeks, and you can see the dominance has been dropping really, hard here. This monthly candle is basically just completely engulfed the last month. Well, so far, I mean, I don't know how long we're going to keep the stream going, but I mean, so far we have in fact bounced. Um, we'll see if we can continue moving up or if it just trends back down. But let's zoom back out for a minute and we did not reach escape velocity yet to get to the top. Make sure you guys subscribe. Click that subscribe button, give the video a thumbs up. Also, check out the Telegram channel in the description below. Actually, I'm going to post a new Telegram channel. I've never posted here before because I actually created Into the Equityverse channel as well. So if you guys want to go talk about stocks, I'll post that Telegram channel. I'm sure people are talking about GameStop in there as well. So make sure you guys check that one out. We also have the altcoin, the microcap Telegram channel. I'll post that one too. There's so many Telegram channels now, but hopefully there's a group for everyone that, you know, if what you're wanting to talk about. All right. What else do you guys want to talk about? You know, we're just sitting here. The price of Bitcoin is slowly bouncing back up. Actually, let's pull up the 20. Let's pull up these things. Let's see if this is the 21. Yeah, we haven't looked at this one here in a little bit. And then let's also look at the 20-day. So this is the 20-day SMA and the 21-day EMA. So let's keep an eye on that because this is something that's actually worth looking at, I think. I mean, you know, if we keep getting hammered down by the 21-week EMA or the 20-week SMA, then obviously that's pretty bearish. But right now we're fairly far down below it. Remember, we also have the premium list at intothecryptoverse.com. Look at this. Uni's making a run at 15 here. I mean, it looks like it already went over it slightly. These are 1-minute candles, so it's not like it would take it that long to play out. Someone says the sell wall at 15 is huge. I mean, I get it. I mean, we've seen these sell walls before, and then they just either cut through it like butter, or they just disappear. So it doesn't mean that it's going to cut through it, but there have been huge sell walls for other coins, and they just broke through it fairly easily. Yeah, I'm just gonna keep it on uni for a few minutes and see if it breaks through 15 to show people that not all sell walls are gonna cause it to go, cause it to go down. A lot of times you can just cut through them and just keep. Yeah, there it is. I mean, it's already above 15, 1502. 1507, 1508. What was that sell wall? What was, anyways, that's just a prime example, right? Where there's this sell wall that's going to keep us down, and doesn't mean it's not going to go back below 15 by any means, but again, sell walls are something that coins can easily get through, and a lot of times they'll just disappear. All right, bye, base C. If you're gonna act like a kid, you gotta go. All right, so let's go. It looks like it actually dropped back down below actually temporarily. Yeah, now it's at 1493. Let's see what Bitcoin's doing. So Bitcoin's at 30.9. Okay, so it has bounced at least. T Time says he watched when I talked about Dot and Uni in the accumulation phase, but you didn't keep them because they were not looking very well. Sometimes it's okay. I mean, like you have to make your decisions at the time. The purpose of this channel is not to say that if we talk about a coin, it doesn't mean it's going to. The idea is not necessarily that it has to go up immediately. We're just picking out projects that should trend up and stand the test of time. Again, in a bull market, it's easy to claim things will go up because a lot of things go up. But I think it's more important to say, look at the projects and try to pick out the ones that will actually outperform the rest of the market. Like Dot, ADA, and Link have been outperforming because they were not in the top 6, and now all of them are in the top 6. At least out of the upper coins. Obviously, if you scroll all the way down, I'm sure there's coins that are up even more than those coins over the last year. But in terms of managing your risk and not taking on coins that are incredibly risky, Dot, ADA, and Link, I felt like were among the best projects, and so far they're holding up fairly well. I would be happy to see Uniswap join them. Obviously, you guys know that Bitcoin, Ethereum, Link, ADA, and Dot are my top 5, but I do own Uniswap, and I do own this token, so I would like to see this one continue to rise through the ranks too. Make sure you guys subscribe, give the video a thumbs up. So we wrap it up here. I don't know. I mean, I just don't want to sit here and watch the market just slowly tick up. Keep an eye on Ethereum. I mean, you can see that as we said earlier, Ethereum will likely bounce back stronger if Bitcoin holds this level, and now Bitcoin is down more, 5% rather than Ethereum. So Ethereum is holding up relatively strongly, and the valuation is still at 0.042. All right, gosh, why do people do this? All right, should we wrap it up here? Looks like the market has bounced so far. We'll see if it holds or not. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, check out the Telegram channel in the description below. We will wrap it up there. Also, we do have the premium list at intothecryptoverse.com for more content. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you next time. Bye.